Greetings, it's your buddy, your pal, your griot, your teacher, your rabbi, your ace, ABW, and I want to tell a story about a guy I know. True story. He represents a lot of guys that I know, but the one that I have in particular, in mind, I know very well. I'm not going to mention my relation to him. If he knew I was talking about him, he'd probably be pretty pissed off. But that's how we learn. We learn through experiences, either our own or ones that we observe close by. We learn through pictures and stories. So this guy I know, very, very handsome guy, very handsome. Even for me even me as a pretty handsome guy myself, I must say he's a very handsome guy. I can say that with all confidence. Just a universally accepted, just all around guy. He has everything going for him in the looks department. He has the voice, he has the credentials as far as education and, all of that. Some on the outside, on the outskirts, you might say he's perfect, or at least he appears that way, right? This guy has come into his 30s, and he realizes that he has not cultivated any meaningful relationship. Now, this is a true story. This is a guy that I know, but I'm sure, as I'm saying this, you can picture, or somebody who fits this description. Maybe this is you. You've gotten to your 30s and you've had no trouble meeting women, getting women in bed, all of that. But you look up and you're in your 30s, everybody around you is getting married, and you can't seem to establish and cultivate a meaningful relationship. This guy that I know of, he's actually, brought forth a child, but he hasn't established a meaningful relationship with the mother of his child. That's a source of contention in his life, unfortunately. That's a common narrative nowadays, unfortunately. Again, he has gotten to a point where he's kind of a has-been. Still good looking, still has everything going for him, but when you run in the same kind of circle, when you haven't developed yourself beyond what the superficial, you become stagnant. And then if we're talking the rules of nature, there's really no such thing as stagnation. You're either evolving or devolving. So he's found himself settling for the company of low-hanging fruit, to borrow a phrase or to turn a phrase. Low-hanging fruit as far as females, and it's becoming it's something new to him. It's a whole new frontier for him. He's not used to kind of settling. Maybe this sounds familiar, and this is true. The guy that I'm thinking of is true, but it paints the picture of the plight of so many men. The guy who's at it all. But you know what? What it comes down to is a problem that I see, that I've observed and I've figured out, is they haven't developed the skills or the fundamentals. They haven't developed the fundamentals of what it really takes to establish a connection. You see, me myself, I was kind of a late bloomer. I'm not very tall. As it is today, I stand 5'10", so that's average height. But it took me a long time. It wasn't until I was 16 years old that I grew to be 5'10". So all my other friends, or a lot of guys around me, cousins and things like that, they were 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet or over at 12 years old. So they had a little head start. had a little bit more confidence, had a bit more room to kind of grow and to become experienced with females. I was a late bloomer. I went through an ugly stage, I guess you could say. A little awkward, and I still have that in me. I still kind of carry that short guy syndrome, that maybe not as handsome as other guys around me, or my perceptions of other guys, or whatever. You know, your biggest enemy is yourself anyway. In your thought life, you are who you think you are. But I still kind of carried that. But what I'm getting at is the reason why I had success with women, as far as establishing connections and meaningful connections, even with me being a player in my day. Maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but I still had a level of integrity, I still had a level of character, to where I left an imprint with certain females, to where they've still reached out to me and told me about how much they've appreciated our time together. Not everybody can say that. But what I'm saying is, I think, and I've observed this about myself, humbly, the reason why I was able to get to that point is because I developed I knew, me having those deficits, those shortcomings, that I had to be as fundamentally sound, so to speak, in my conversation, in my building rapport, all of those things that it takes to establish a connection, all of those things that it takes to create attraction, to create interest, to maintain attraction, maintain interest, and to incite further interest going forward, you know, and to always keep that air of what's next going with the female, because females get bored. They get, you know, there's, in the history of relationships, I'm pretty sure most of them have gotten to the point where they're past the casualness because of the female. The female is always, at any point in a relationship, if you know, there's always going to be that point where it's going to be the conversation about where are we going, what's next. And 9 times out of 10, the initiate of that conversation is the female. So females are always looking towards that next step. And the reason why I've always been able to it seemed like women always will want to accelerate that process with me, is because I intuitively, and then later on, was very cognizant of just basic fundamentals to relationships. That a guy who kind of gets things handed to him, or kind of has women fall in his lap, they lack those fundamentals. The reason why Michael Jordan is my favorite basketball player of all time. I think he's the greatest. That can be up for debate, but I think he's the greatest basketball player of all time. The reason why Michael Jordan was so great is because he was so fundamentally sound. His footwork was always on point. His jump shot was textbook. On defense, people don't talk about Michael Jordan's defense as much, but his defense was textbook. He was fundamentally sound. You know, Kobe Bryant always talks about I saw an interview when he was in high school, or he said when he was in high school, that while everybody was watching the flash of Michael Jordan, him, you know, sticking his tongue out and dunking on people, Kobe Bryant was watching his footwork. He was watching the things that he was doing to get to where he was. And the thing that made Michael Jordan so great, and Kobe Bryant, is because, coupled with their exceptional athletic ability, was the fact that they were so fundamentally sound. So just the fact that they were so athletic hyper athletic, super athletic, that only accentuated their fundamentals. So they were able to do the simple things that much better because of their athletic ability. Michael Jordan still would have been a great basketball player or a decent basketball player because he was just naturally gifted athletically. But since he was so fundamentally sound, he was able to, quantum leap over his competition, literally and figuratively. Somebody like LeBron James, this might be, I don't want to get into a basketball discussion, but somebody like LeBron James, I don't think as his physical ability fades, it's going to be more and more glaring of how much he lacks his fundamentals. LeBron James doesn't have much of a post game. His jump shot can be sketchy at times. But what I'm saying is, if LeBron James had that, his fundamentals, if his fundamentals were just on point like that, he'd be really purely unstoppable. And that's what I'm saying about Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, is that the fact that they were so athletic naturally, coupled with the fact that they were just technically sound with basketball. They were just technically sound basketball players, fundamental basketball players. And that's what has made them two of the greatest of all time. And so what I'm saying, not to digress, but what I'm saying is I see a lot of good-looking guys who are LeBron Jameses. They just naturally gifted in the way of some natural charm. They're very good-looking, but they lack the fundamentals to maintain and sustain true, meaningful relationships. So, no matter what you look like, develop your aptitude, your charm, your knowledge. Develop those things. Those are fundamentals. That's what's going to keep that woman in your life. That's what's going to keep that attraction going. That's what's going to keep your game going far beyond if your looks fade, or if your your level of status fades. That's what's going to keep your relationship. If you're in a relationship, that's what's going to sustain your relationship and keep her always looking towards the new. Because that's what a man is. I've had my definition of a man. Man is a manifester of awesome newness. So as long as you're growing, you're always going to have new questions, new quests, and new questions that will incite the curiosity and the attraction of a woman. Not to get too personal, but I have a beautiful relationship with my wife. I personally know a few players that have beautiful relationships with their former players, have beautiful relationships with their significant others. Because when you leave the playing to the wayside and you get serious about a female, those fundamentals that it takes to become a player in the first place, to be a true player. Because a lot of guys who are good looking, or especially this guy who I'm thinking of, he played with a lot of women, but he wasn't a true player. And I don't want to get too, it's a right way to do the wrong things, quote unquote. It's the right way to do the wrong things, and a lot of guys just aren't built for the game of juggling multiple women. And this guy I'm thinking about, he played the game, but he wasn't a true player. And so, but I can say it with all confidence. I mean, just my experience, qualify my experience of the knowledge that I have. And I have a beautiful relationship with my wife, and I'm proud to say that her attraction to me, and she'll tell me, she's like, I'm always falling in love with you all over again, because you're always at the root of me. I'm the same guy I've always been, at the root, the hardcore root of me. That never changes. but I'm always growing. I pride myself, and I'm diligent about it. I'm intentional about it, of always growing, always evolving. Again, I always have new quests, and I have new questions, and I have new standards. I have new things that I'm developing. Always. It gets to a point where it's habit. I wasn't always this way. I learned to be this way. It's not something that I learned from somebody else. Not something that I saw. Because most, the generation before me, they didn't teach me this. I picked up on it. And, I take pride in the fact that my wife, she'll tell me, I'm always falling in love with you all over again. Because I'm always, and you want that. You want that. That's really what it's all about. So develop, but it goes back to really what I was saying about the fundamentals. I take the time to really listen and talk to my wife. We have great conversation. That's a fundamental practice and skill, to just not dominate your conversations, not be, learn how to really, I keep my tools sharp on my wife. I don't, I see a lot of guys talking about, well, they'll go out there and they'll flirt with other women, and they're saying they're keeping their tools sharp. And I do that to an extent. I'm not gonna lie to you. My wife knows that. She's witnessed it firsthand, and it's just something she laughs off. It's just me. But I do my major tool sharpening on my wife, because she's the one ultimately she's the only one who matters. That's my queen. That's who I'm building my empire with. That's the only one whose feedback I really need anyway. So I'm practicing my conversation skills with her. I'm always practicing my charm with her. I'm always practicing my level of romance with her, my level of suspense and surprise, and what it takes to become an attractive man. I'm always keeping myself in shape, and all of that fundamentals. I'm always I'm an avid reader. I'm always learning, and I'm not, I don't want to be a know-it-all, but I'm always expressing to her new ideas, expressing to her new levels and new contexts of conversation, of subject matter. I'm always stretching myself, so I'm always challenging her, stretch herself, and it creates newness. It's the antidote to complacency. Combats complacency, and that's the last thing you want, is complacency in a relationship. It goes back to the fundamentals. Develop your fundamentals. No matter how good looking you think you are, no matter how charming you think you are, there's always more. If you're not growing, you're not evolving, you're devolving. And that's just a rule of nature. The second rule of thermodynamics is everything is winding down. Unless you intentionally combat that, you are devolving. So that's all I want to say. Again, this is your friend, your buddy, your pal, ABW. If you got a question for me, hit me up, man. Let's move the culture forward. Let's move the conversation forward. Let's make men great again. Let's turn it into a new era of men. Hope I inspire you. God bless. Take care. Good night. Good morning, wherever you are. Good day. Bienvenido.